National Seminar Program, and we have a very interesting and unique topic today, unlike what we hear normally, the research areas. And this is very relevant today as we are celebrating our 75th year of Indian independence, and which government is celebrating as Azadi Ka Amrit Mahotsav. Indian independence movement has been a unique movement, as it inspired many other countries to gain independence from colonial era. And it was so remarkable that once British Prime Minister Harold Macmillan commented the wind of change, that Indian independence movement was something like that. And it continued to be that, and India is still inspiring many other nations, not only in the political area but also scientific areas. And this is very relevant today when we see the vaccination drive, which has crossed 2 billion. So that this time also India has converted the challenges posed by this COVID pandemic into an opportunity and leading the world. So again the world is looking towards us. So it is science again. What we really don't know, we the student of science sometimes miss the role of scientists in the Indian independence movement. Many times we think, okay, everybody was participating, politicians were participating, social reformers, spiritual leaders were there. But what scientists were doing? And so certainly they were not completely isolated from the society. They were also involved in that. There are stories hidden in the books. Few people know, some people don't know. So we thought to invite one of the distinguished speakers, Shri Jayant Sahasrabudhe, who is the National Organizing Secretary of VIBHA, Vijnana Bharti, to speak on this topic, and he has done tremendous research on this topic, how different scientists have played their role not only in their laboratories but also outside the laboratory for the nation building and independence movement. So to give a introduction of today's speaker, Shri Jayant Sahasrabudhe has graduated from Mumbai University in physics. Later, and he had a deep interest in nuclear physics, and later he joined VIBHA Atomic Research Center as a scientist. After that, his interest developed into a societal part of the movement where he can contribute. So he moved to this organization and contributed immensely. And as a NOC of Vijnana Bharti, he has initiated many schemes like Vijnana Manthan, which nurtures young students, and one of the programs related to that we had organized recently, GIST, and many other things which are going on under the aegis of Vijnana Bharti. Now I request Shri Jayant Sahasrabudhe to deliver a keynote lecture.
Respected director of this institute, Dr. Dinkarji Saranke, brothers and sisters present over here in this august gathering. First of all, I would like to extend my greetings to all of you, as all of us are celebrating Azadi Ka Amrit Mahotsav. Because this year, on coming 15th of August, as a country, we will be completing 75th year of independence, and we will be entering 76th year of independence on this coming 15th of August. Entire country decided that we need to celebrate this 75th year of independence, and Prime Minister of our country gave us 5 ideas. Based on these 5 ideas, let us celebrate this year. And first amongst those 5 ideas was Swatantrata struggle for freedom. So this celebration has given us an opportunity to revisit our freedom struggle and to know more about it. So today I am going to speak about the same. Generally speaking, all of us in our country have an impression that this entire freedom struggle was mainly political or social in nature. These are the two domains of our society where this struggle or battle was carried out to gain independence. But this is not true. Struggle for independence was carried out in almost all walks of life of our society. And the domain of science was certainly not an exception. Our own scientists and people who were related to science, they carried out that struggle in this domain of science. But generally, we don't acknowledge this because we don't have any kind of awareness about this struggle which was carried out in the domain of science. So let us see one by one in phase-wise manner why we need to understand that yes, struggle of freedom or to gain swatantrata was carried out even in the domain of science and why that is even important today. Let us look at the different invaders who invaded our country. The last invasion was by British people, which started in June 1757 and it was there till August 1947, 190 years. But before them there were invaders who invaded our country. Number of them are there. All of us know who were they. But there is a great difference between the last invasion and all previous invasions. Though the aim or goal was same. Goal was what? I don't normally use this word azadi. Because if we look into it, then azadi means independence or mukti. But in our country, we have always called this particular struggle as Swadhinata Sangram or Swadhinata Sangharsh. There is a big difference between these two terms. What is that difference? Swadhinata speaks about Swa. Because any invader or aggressor who wanted to subjugate this land attacked identity of our country. Because they were doing, unless we erase the identity of Indians, Indians will not surrender before us, they will not become our followers, and we won't be able to win them. So attack was on the very identity of India. That is called as Swa. You take any invasion and you will find out that what they wanted to do, they wanted to erase or obliterate or jeopardize the identity of our country. Let us think about two great identities of our country. One is, India was known to the entire world as a country which generates knowledge and gives that knowledge to entire humanity. There were several universities which were existing in our country and they were all flourished universities. And aggressors or invaders attacked those universities, centers of knowledge. As we know, famous example of Nalanda. Nalanda was destroyed by one such invader, and what he did, he not only destroyed the buildings of Nalanda, but he put fire to the big library of Nalanda. History tells us that that entire library was burning for 6 continuous months. So we now just can imagine that at least I have not come across any library. If we put fire to it, it will keep on burning for 6 months. So one can just imagine at this point of time that what kind of treasure must be there in that library which was torched by an invader. And what was the purpose? If Indians lose this identity that they are the great generators of knowledge, then they will lose their self esteem, they will lose their confidence, and they will follow us. They will become our subjects. That was the identity, that was the idea. So, all the time, till British invasion, we will find this aim or goal of those invaders that let us finish off, erase the identity of India. Another identity was India was known as Sone ki Chidiya. So people used to come to our country to take away or to plunder wealth of our country, because India was known to the entire world, the most wealthiest country in this world. So that was another identity which they wanted to exploit. So there are others also, but I won't go into details of those identities. But they wanted to erase such identities of our country to make this country surrender before them. So that was the idea, that was the goal of all invaders. But you will find big difference between their tools and methodologies. And if we can divide or classify these invaders in two groups or classes, as always all scientists do, what we will find that in one group you will find all invaders except British people. And there is another group where only one invader is there, that is called as British or Britain. What is the difference? The difference is there in tool and method. All other invaders, they used all conventional methods and tools. Tools were sword, hammer, fire, all such things were there. Methods were very crude, barbaric methods were there. What British did then, though their aim was same, the tools they employed were most scientific in nature. They utilized science as a tool to subjugate India. And the methods they used to subjugate our country were scientific methods. So we need to understand this fact. British started their rule over here in this country, as history tells us, in the month of June 1757, when East India Company's small army attacked army of Bengal, Nawab of Bengal, and they had a victory. But it was not a victory because of their great things or because of their great strength. They had corrupt practices and because of that they could win that battle. But we need to understand the fact. Normally what happens? Someone who wins the battle becomes a king. But East India Company or Robert Clive was the commander of that army. East India Company's army was not at all interested in displacing or replacing Nawab of Bengal and become king. What he did, what British people did, they asked for the right to collect revenue. So in 1757, what they did, because history tells us that the GDP of Bengal at that time was at least 4 times bigger than that of GDP of England. So our country was so wealthy. And we need to understand chronological events that in 1760, first industrial revolution started in England. And all of us know that two basic things are required for the success of any kind of industry. One is money. One has to invest some money for that, for the success of industry. And another is natural resource to run that industry. And both these things were not available plenty in England. So British people were dependent on other territories around the world to get these two things to run their industry. So British people were interested in collecting revenue from India. But another main factor was to get natural resources to run their own industries. And what they did then, Just 7 years after this first industrial revolution, what they did, they established one particular institution in our country in 1767, 10 years after the first victory at Plassey. And today, Department of Science and Technology, you are all aware about it. If you go to the website of DST, you will find one particular description over there, that which is the oldest scientific institution in our country under Government of India. So DST tells us the most old scientific institution in our country is Survey of India, which was established by East India Company in the year 1767. So today our government acknowledges what? Which is the most old or historical scientific institution in our country? Survey of India, that was established by whom? British people. They never established any scientific laboratory or any scientific academic institution in our country. What they did establish was Survey of India. Though entire country was not with them at that point of time. Many of you may be aware that in 1818, British people could win Pune, Peshwa in 1818. So most of the part of this country came under their rule mostly in 1818. Even at that point of time, entire India was not under British rule. But most of the 90% of the part of today's country was under their rule in 1818. So from 1757 till 1818, they were just reaching out to different parts of this country. But still, in 1767, what they did establish was Survey of India. And in first 100 years of their rule, it was the rule of East India Company. 1757 till 1857, when we had our first war of independence. All of us know that many great heroes like Jhansi Rani, all of them were from that 1857 war of independence. So in this first phase of 100 years, when East India Company ruled our country, they did establish all what we call today as scientific and technological institutions in our country to plunder our country. Not for the sake of benefit of these people, this country's people or natives of this country. They established all kinds of surveys. Survey of India was the mother of all those surveys. Geological Survey of India, Botanical Survey of India, Zoological Survey of India, Trigonometric Survey of India, Anthropological Survey of India, Economic Survey of India, what not. Why they wanted to study this? Because they wanted to understand what kind of natural resources are available in India. And now today we call them as all scientific institutions. But the main goal of these institutions to know what is available in India and how to exploit it, how to plunder this wealth. That was the idea. Forest Research Institute. Many acts. Today we talk about Jungle Satyagraha. Why Jungle Satyagraha was there? Because they wanted to control entire forest land in this country. And there were people who were living over there in those areas and they had great relation with forest. But British wanted to separate them just to take away that wealth to England. So that was the idea. Forest laws were not to protect environment. Today we call it as, oh, these laws are protecting environment, but that was not the case. Then to take away this natural wealth from different parts of our country, railways was established. It was not for the sake of the benefit of natives or Indians. Like if we go to Uttarakhand today, unfortunately people call it as UK, but it is not United Kingdom, but it is Uttarakhand. If we go to Kumaon Hills, the last station of the railway over there is Kathgodam. That name speaks many things about British exploitation. They used to collect wood from that forest over there, and railway was established to take away that wood to Mumbai. That was the idea. Recently, I was there in Punjab and I visited Malwa area of Punjab. Firozpur, Punjab Mail. You might have heard of this great olden railway track or railway route. So, what people told me over there, they asked our farmers to grow cotton which was useful for the mills in Manchester. So, it was forceful imposition over there in that area on farmers that they are supposed to grow this particular species of cotton which is most useful for the mills in Manchester or any other parts of England. So that is how they started exploiting our country. And entire biodiversity of Malwa was disturbed because of that. Then take example of tea. Today, I think most of us over here, they must be drinking tea every day. I don't know what kind of benefit we get by drinking tea. But what they did, if you go to Assam, then you will find how they have destroyed or disturbed the biodiversity of Assam just because of tea gardens. They wanted tea and they established tea gardens over there, and entire biodiversity of that area was vanished because of that. It was a monoculture at that point of time, and even today we are suffering because of that. How we are suffering for that or because of that, unless you visit Assam, you won't be able to know what we have lost because of that tea and tea gardens. So that kind of exploitation was there. In 1857, when they had that great shock of First War of Independence, they stopped the rule of East India Company, and Queen Victoria's rule was established in India. And next 90 years was we were under British rulers, Victoria, Queen. So they started, and to create a kind of feel-good factor in this country, they started 3 universities over here. In 1857, they established Mumbai, Chennai and Kolkata universities. But I don't know how many of you know this fact, that science topics, science and mathematics was totally absent over there in all these 3 universities. They were not thinking of teaching science and mathematics to Indians because they were knowing fact that if we teach them, then we are going to give them our own tool. That was their fear. So we need to understand this fact, that what they did over here, though they did establish educational institutions, they never wanted Indians to learn science and technology or mathematics. So that was their game plan. And there are many others who could understand this, and they started learning many things about British game plan and how they wanted to subjugate this country. And our own people could recognize what is the tool of British people. Then there was a great attack on our knowledge treasure also. Macaulay, all of us know his name. It is very unfortunate, but still we know his name. He was here from 1831 to 1835. His aim to come to India was not to establish an educational system in India, but what we call today as jurisprudence or legal system in India. That was his main goal. He never had this idea in mind that he will come and he will establish educational system in India. He was a great lawyer, and basically he was a great historian, Macaulay, Thomas Babington Macaulay. And along with establishing British jurisprudence over here, he started looking into establishing British educational system over here. And here, what he did, he demeaned Indian knowledge system and abused it like anything. What he used to say, Sanskrit is the most potential language of our country. Even today, world just cannot think about artificial intelligence or machine learning or many such things without Sanskrit. Or there is a new emerging area that is called as science of languages. And those who have established this or pioneered this subject, science of languages, you might have heard of them, Noam Chomsky. So likewise, and his previous generation people, they learned all these things about science of languages, basic things from Sanskrit. There is one great person, Leonard Bloomfield. What he said about Sanskrit and especially about Panini, the book written by Panini was 3,500 years ago. But Leonard Bloomfield, the pioneer of this artificial intelligence or science of languages, what he said about this book, he says, the Ashtadhyayi authored by Panini is the greatest monument of human intellect. The book was written 3,500 years ago. But today's science acknowledges the greatness of this book. So we can understand the strength of Sanskrit. But what they did, they said Sanskrit is a dead language. If you want to enter the modern era of this modern world, then you should do away with Sanskrit. You should forget anything what is there in Sanskrit. Sanskrit is fully filled with all kind of myths. So they called whatever knowledge it is there in Sanskrit, they started calling it as mythology. Something which is based on imagination. It has no base of any kind of reason. It is not a reason-based creation of knowledge. So something most regressive, something which is based on all kind of blind faiths. And a famous sentence of Macaulay was like this: Sanskrit is barren of useful knowledge. That is the sentence of Macaulay. So how he abused Sanskrit. Sanskrit has nothing which can be used for the benefit of humans. So it is barren of useful knowledge. It is full of myths. So one should not go into it. One should forget everything what is there in Sanskrit. So that was the idea. So they wanted to destroy the identity, knowledge identity of India. And there are many other things also. So they wanted to attack these specific identities of our country and they wanted to subjugate this country. And today people have done a lot of study on these things. You might have heard of one scientist who recently died. He is no more with us now. His name is Rajesh Kochar. He was one of the directors of CSR Labs, which is there in Delhi, NISTAS. Now it is called as NISPER, CSR NISPER. And basically he was an astrophysicist from Punjab University, Chandigarh. He wrote an article, research paper. The title of that paper is very interesting. The title is like this: Science utilized as a tool to consolidate colonial power in India. So at length he has described how British people utilize science as a tool to consolidate their rule in India. And he has given umpteen number of examples in that research paper. There is another scholar who is still with us, but very old, about around 90. His name is Dr. Ashish Nandi. He has written extensively on this topic, and there is one specific research article which he has published with the title Science as a Reason of State. How state utilized science, means British state utilized science as a tool to rule this country. And he has also given many examples. One statement what he has made in that article is like this: British colonizers used a kind of black magic that was based on the discoveries of modern science to impress the minds of native Indians. This is the statement by Ashish Nandi in that scientific article. And those who are interested, you can go and read that entire article on internet. But all these people have studied many such things. But why they could study this? Because there were people in those days who could understand the game plan of British people, what they are doing over here. and what kind of tool they are building in their hand, and what kind of method they are employing or administering to subjugate this country. And many such stalwarts were there, and one we should always remember that person, and his name is Dr. Mahendralal Sarkar. He was a great physician. He is a second MD in our country because he studied medicine or science of medicine through British Medical School that was established in 1835 at Kolkata. His birth year is 1833. When he became young, he entered the school. But the medical school, the purpose of that medical school to generate doctors over here who will act as assistants to British doctors. That was the idea. But this Mahendralal Sarkar was a brilliant fellow, a great intellectual person, and along with medical science, he had great interest in almost all branches of science, physics, mathematics, astrophysics, and whatnot. So he used to study many such things, and his greatness was such that any British person or professor, when that professor used to be absent, that person used to ask Mahendralal Sarkar to teach that particular topic at medical school, even though Mahendralal Sarkar was a student over there. So one can understand the capacity of Mahendralal Sarkar. There is a great story about him. British Medical Association was established in 1863 in Kolkata, first branch of British Medical Association. This is the mother institute of Indian Medical Association, which we hear today in our country. This is the mother organization, British Medical Association. It was first chapter of it was established in 1863 at Kolkata, when Mahendralal Sarkar was 30 years young person, a famous doctor in Kolkata, a famous physician, and he was given responsibility as a secretary of this British Medical Association's Kolkata chapter. And at that point of time, along with allopathy, that is the British medicine system, homeopathy also entered our country through some German people, because that is the original place of homeopathy. And British, they never used to like this homeopathy. They always used to hate homeopathy, calling homeopathy with great abuses as this is a pseudoscience and whatnot. And the Shishya or Chela of British, Mahendralal Sarkar, he also used to abuse homeopathy like anything. So in his first speech as a secretary of British Medical Association's Kolkata chapter, he criticized homeopathy like anything, and he called it as a pseudoscience, and he said we need to throw away all these homeopaths or pseudo doctors. That is how he used to abuse them. But this happened in 1863. In 1866, a very strange thing he could experience, because he was of the opinion that he is the only greatest physician in Kolkata, and whoever comes to him as a patient, he is bound to get cured of that illness. So that was his confidence, or ego also one can call it as, because he has also said that I am such an egoistic person. But I will tell you what happened with him in those years. One patient came to him, and he started treating that patient, but he could not get cured. And this patient went to a homeopath, and he got totally cured because of the treatment from a homeopath. So this was a great shock to Mahendralal Sarkar. And though he was honest, though he was egoistic person, he was honest enough, and he reached out to that homeopath. He was also a good friend of Mahendralal Sarkar, but he used to hate him because he started pursuing homeopathy. But Mahendralal Sarkar, with clean mind, went to him to investigate what kind of treatment was given to this patient by this pseudo doctor. That was his intention. But what he could find, that homeopath has done a very logical diagnosis of that illness of that patient, and the way he treated that patient was also very much logical in nature. And because of this, he started investigating homeopathy, whether it is based on all kind of reasons or logic or not. So he started reading homeopathy, and to his surprise, he came across all the theories of homeopathy, and he said all these theories are very much logical in nature. They are all reason-based theories. And he started thinking that, oh, I have done wrong thing, that I used to call them with great wrong words and whatnot. So in next meeting, first meeting in the year 1867 of British Medical Association, when he stood to give an address to people over there in that assembly, he started with this fact that this happened with me recently, and though I used to abuse homeopathy like anything, it was a wrong thing on my part. I have learned homeopathy, and what I could discover is homeopathy is also based on logic, or it is a reason-based science. So as soon as British people who were there in that assembly learned that he got transformed, he got converted to homeopathy, British people boycotted him from that British Medical Association. And they saw to it that even his practice will get disturbed like anything. He was a great physician at that point of time in Kolkata. Someone told me, I have never found any evidence, written evidence for this, but as people told me in Kolkata that if Mahendralal Sarkar visits any family as a doctor, he used to charge 500 rupees in 1865 or 1870. One can imagine what kind of stature he must be having at that point of time. And all great people in those days were patients of Mahendralal Sarkar, like Bankim Chandra Chatterjee, who wrote Vande Mataram, or Ramakrishna Paramahamsa, who is a great guru of Swami Vivekananda, Ishwar Chandra Vidyasagar, and many others. They were all contemporaries and they were patients of Mahendralal Sarkar. And this was a great shock to Mahendralal Sarkar, because he said, these British people told me by teaching science to me that one has to investigate based on all kind of reasons. Based on logical thinking, we should introspect or investigate what kind of logic is there in one particular theory. I did same thing, and even then I was punished severely like this by British people, by my teachers, who taught me science like this, that everything should be investigated based on logic. I did the same thing, and what I could find was this. This is the truth, this is the fact, and even then I was punished like this. And even what happened, he used to publish several research papers in the Journal of British Medical Association. British people stopped publishing his research papers also. So he was totally boycotted by British people just because of his love for homeopathy. And his love was based on logic. It was not based on any kind of blind faith. This was a great shock to Mahendralal Sarkar, and then he could realize many things in his life. And there that point of transformation came into his life. He resolved to establish first Swadeshi Science Journal in our country. And he started Kolkata Medical Journal in the year 1868. This was a journal started by Mahendralal Sarkar, and he said specifically that this is a journal for Indian scientists or Indian researchers, Kolkata Medical Journal. And in the editorial piece of that first edition of this Kolkata Medical Journal, he came out with an idea, and he said, I am resolving that I, along with the help of others in this country, establish a scientific institution by Indians and for Indians. So that kind of idea was there, that emerged in his mind because of this injustice by British people towards him. So that was the point when he got transformed totally, And he thought that what kind of injustice is there by this British rule on Indians. And he could understand that science is the best tool for nations building. So national building process can happen only through science, and that science we need to develop on our own in our country. So he had that idea and he came out with this idea, and first scientific institution by Indians and for Indians was established by Mahendralal Sarkar with the help of several Indians at that point of time, and that institution is famously known as Indian Association for the Cultivation of Science, IACS, at Kolkata, that works under DST now. And if you go to the website of IACS today, even at this moment, what you will find in the history chapter of that website, what he had in his mind, idea was like this, it has specifically written over there, he wanted this institution to be solely native. So this scientific institution is only for native of this country. And another thing what he had in his mind was, he wanted this institution to be purely national. And he has specifically said, he had this idea in his mind that this institution should remain outside the control of British rule. He never thought of getting funds from British rulers to establish scientific institution in our country. All these people, Bankim Chandra Chatterjee, Ishwar Chandra Vidyasagar, even Ramakrishna Paramahamsa, then King of Tripura, Tripura Maharaj, Tarkanath Palip, you might have heard of this name. All these great peoples, generous people, they donated greatly to establish first independent scientific institution in our country. And he had a great dream, and he said, let us generate different generations of scientists of India to challenge intellectual hegemony of British people. That was his idea, that was his dream. And what we come to know now, all great first generation, second generation, third generation scientists of our country who could create a golden age of science in India, all those people were from this great institution. Acharya Jagdish Chandra Basu, Acharya Prafulla Chandra Ray, Meghnad Saha, Satyendranath Basu, and the only Nobel laureate in our country in the domain of science, Chandrasekhar Venkatraman, did his entire research work in ISCS at Kolkata. So one can understand. So today what people say, what history tells us is that right from 1900 till 1930, history acknowledges that this was the golden age of Indian science. Though we say that we have done a lot of great progress in science and technology, but even today, what history acknowledges is the golden age of Indian science appeared in first 3 decades of 20th century. That is from 1900 till 1930. 1930 is the year when C.V. Raman received the Nobel Prize. And many other things happened. So we need to learn all those things. In 1924, Satyendranath Basu presented his research paper, Bose-Einstein continuum, and many other things happened like that. So all these scientists, they emerged from this institution, which was solely native and purely national. At that point of time, there was no facility in our country to teach science to our own people. This was an institution where all our first generation, second generation, third generation scientists started learning science. There was no other institution available in our country. And for higher studies, they had to go to England. Like Acharya Jagdish Chandra Basu went to England to become a graduate in the domain of science. So he was the first graduate from England who returned to India. And why he had that idea in mind? Because he had this idea that I will teach science to my own people, to my own countrymen. That was the idea. He was the most brilliant student in his batch. He stood first with great distinction, And his guru, Lord Raleigh, who received Nobel Prize in 1904, when Jagdish Chandra Basu was a student, Lord Raleigh was the president of Royal Society London, which is known as Kashi of science in those days. Lord Raleigh was of the opinion, and he asked Jagdish Chandra Basu to stay in England because he said you can do research work in the domain of physics particularly, and there is no laboratory in India, there is no such facility in India, so why you are returning to your own motherland? There is no such facility. And you will be wasting your entire intellectual capacity over there. But Jagdish Chandra Basu had a clear-cut idea in his mind that I should return to my country and I should start teaching science in my country. Why he had this idea? When he came back in 1884, understand what kind of situation must be there in that year 1884 or in that period. In 1885, Congress was established at Mumbai. Just 1 year before, Jagdish Chandra Basu came to India, returned to India, and he applied to become a science teacher in our country. At that point of time, in our country, British established all kind of services in our country in two parts. One was called as Imperial Service and another was called as Provincial Service. So in similar way, in the domain of education, there was Imperial Education Service and another was Provincial Education Service. In Imperial Education Service, only white-skinned people used to teach everything. So those who are white-skinned people, they used to become teachers in this Imperial Education Service, and all black-skinned people, means Indians, natives, they used to become teachers in Provincial Education Service. And what kind of injustice was there? If a white-skinned person is going to get, say, salary of 1,000 rupees, 1,000, then an Indian with similar skills, with similar knowledge, that person will get salary only of 300 rupees. So it was a clear-cut racial discrimination. So when Jagdish Chandra Basu applied, he had a letter from Lord Raleigh, and that letter was sent to the then Governor General of India, and then that Governor General sent that letter from Lord Raleigh to the educational officers in Kolkata. Alan Croft, Sir Alan Croft was the head of the British education system at Kolkata, and after receiving an application of Jagdish Chandra Basu, he gave a response to that application, and response was like this. This has been clearly mentioned in the first biography of Jagdish Chandra Basu that was written by Sir Patrick Geddes. This first biography of Jagdish Chandra Basu was published in 1920, and he has extensively described this entire episode. And what Patrick Geddes said, that what kind of reply was received by Jagdish Chandra Basu. Please listen to it carefully. We need to understand this fact. Reply was like this: as Indians have no aptitude for exact methods of science, no Indian can teach science. Who was the applicant? An individual called as Jagdish Chandra Basu. What was the response or reply? Indians have no aptitude for exact methods of science, so no Indian can teach science. They would have said specifically that Jagdish Chandra Basu, you do not have any kind of aptitude for exact methods of science, so we cannot allow you to teach science because you are not capable enough to do that. But response was a sweeping response. It was said specifically, Indians have no aptitude for exact methods of science. So that kind of, what should I say, a great humiliation of Indians by British rulers. And because of a pressure from up, today we experience all kind of such pressures now. And because of that, even in that time, they had to accept Jagdish Chandra Basu as a teacher, but till that point of time, they never accepted any Indian as a teacher of science. So they said, because there is a pressure from up on us, we are accepting you as a teacher of science, but we are appointing you on a temporary basis in this provincial education service, and as you are a temporary teacher, your salary will be merely 100 rupees, not even 300 rupees. Jagdish Chandra Basu studied where? In England, in Cambridge and London University. Because there was no facility in India at that point of time to become graduate in the subject of science. No such facility was there. Even he studied over there, what kind of treatment he received by British government? That you are not capable enough to teach science. Not only you, all Indians are not capable enough to teach science. And what Jagdish Chandra Basu did then? Interesting part comes over here. It was a sheer injustice. It was a sheer example of racial discrimination. Jagdish Chandra Basu stood against this injustice. And Patrick Giddens has specifically mentioned that Jagdish Chandra Basu initiated a new form of protest against this sheer injustice and racial discrimination. And what was that new form of protest? He said, I will not accept single paisa as a salary from British rule, but as you have given me an appointment as a temporary teacher, I will teach physics over here without taking any single pay from you. So that is the way of protest. Not accepting single paisa as a salary, because that was a sheer injustice. And Jagdish Chandra Basu, how long he did this protest? For 1 month, 2 months? You can imagine. You are drawing salary at the end of every month. So you can imagine everything better than me. He did it for 3 continuous years. He taught physics over there without accepting single pay for 3 long years. Can we imagine this? A person who has become graduate from British University came to India, back to his own motherland, started teaching science, but there was a great injustice he could encounter at that point of time. But he stood against that great thing. And what was the result of that? At the end of 3 years, British accepted him as a teacher of science on permanent basis, and they gave him salary of all 3 years with retrospective effect. And they abolished this discriminatory system in India. One is in Imperial Education Service and Provincial Education Service. So that was the victory of, listen to it, first satyagraha of any Indian. Why I am calling this as a satyagraha? I will tell you. It is not without any reason I am calling this as a satyagraha, but all wise people can understand this. Why? What is satyagraha? I started searching for the definition of satyagraha. I got one. It was from Britannica Encyclopedia, and it has specifically mentioned what is satyagraha? A determined non-violent protest or resistance against any kind of injustice. That is satyagraha. Can this entire episode fits very well into this definition? This was a protest, a determined protest, a non-violent protest against injustice and racial discrimination. So first satyagraha in this great independence struggle was started in 1884, and it was for 3 years, and the satyagrahi became victorious at the end of that satyagraha. Generally people, and history tells us, and generally there is a opinion in our country that satyagraha means Gandhiji. But Gandhiji had first satyagraha in Champaran, Bihar in 1970. And because of that, this definition has come up. A determined, non-violent protest or resistance against injustice. But don't you feel that what Jagdish Chandra Basu did was nothing but a kind of satyagraha, or it was a satyagraha? So we need to understand all these things. In 1894, Jagdish Chandra Basu started his research work. There was no funding agency in our country. British people were not interested in giving funding to any kind of scientific research project. He put his own money to do research in the domain of science. And within 1 year, he came out with a discovery of wireless communication. Today's UGC chairman, Dr. Jagdish Kumar, erstwhile he was Vice Chancellor of JNU, he told me that every time when I start teaching about semiconductor devices, diode, I specifically tell my students that first diode was discovered by an Indian and he was a Jagdish Chandra Basu. The concept of semiconductor itself was a discovery of Jagdish Chandra Basu, and that too in 1895. Can we imagine this? So within 1 year, he could come out with this great discovery. So we can understand the intellectual capacity of Jagdish Chandra Basu. And he was a person who could apply physics in the domain of biology. So we had a new topic called as biophysics. And today people say that at that point of time, he was made a laughing stock because he said there was a nervous system even in plants. And now there is a subtopic called as plant neurobiology. Even people are talking about biological clocks, circadian rhythm and whatnot. Today people say that he was a father of all these branches of modern science or biology. But Jagdish Chandra Basu had this courage. He was a courageous enough. And he took on British people like this in his lifetime. But we talk about Jagdish Chandra Basu and his discoveries, but we never think about his patriotism and what he did to challenge British intellectual hegemony, and how Indians were abused by British people about their scientific capacity. Those who are in the domain of science, they should understand this. How our people or how Indians were demeaned by British people or Westerners just to prove their white supremacy, to legitimize their rule in India. What they did, they started doing anthropology and whatnot. They wanted to establish many such things. Then Acharya Prafulla Chandra Rai followed Jagdish Chandra Basu. Jagdish Chandra Basu's birthday is 30th November and birth year is 1858. Acharya Jagdish Chandra Basu's birth year is 1861 and birthday is 2nd of August. Recently we celebrated his birthday. We had a conference with Delhi University and we celebrated him as a scientist and as a freedom fighter, because all these people, what they did, they utilized science as a tool, as a struggle. For that struggle, what was their tool? Science was their tool. Acharya Prafulla Chandra, what he did, he came from Edinburgh after doing his PhD in chemistry, and in 1901 he established first Swadeshi industry based on science. It is Bengal Chemicals and Pharmaceutical Works. It was established in 1901. In 1902 he came out with, or he published, first volume of History of Hindu Chemistry. I don't know how many of you have heard or read this book. It is a monumental work by Acharya Prafulla Chandra Rai. History of Hindu Chemistry. Second part of that book was published in 1908, and that has been acknowledged by entire scientific fraternity across the world. Even Nature published many of the chapters of this book continuously. So that kind of respect was given by entire scientific fraternity for this monumental work by Acharya Prafulla Chandra. And he wrote great history of development of chemistry in India from ancient time till 16th century. It's a great book. It is available on internet. All of us should read it. And all of us not only should read the interesting chapters of this book, but the foreword written by Acharya Prafulla Chandra. And he has specifically mentioned why I am writing this book. To create impulse in the minds of my countrymen. They should stand with great confidence against British intellectual hegemony. So with all kind of evidences, I have written this book. and I have established the glory of Indian science for the world. I have presented this entire glorious past of India in the domain of science to the world. Let them understand what India has done and how India has transferred scientific knowledge from this country to the entire world. So that was established by Prafulla Chandra Ray, and what kind of efforts he might have taken in those days. And in 1907, when Tatas came with Jamshedpur Tata Steel Industry, Prafulla Chandra Ray went to Tata's and he said, see, for this production of steel, you will need sulfuric acid. And now it is me, because I have learned chemistry, modern chemistry, and it is my responsibility to provide you sulfuric acid. You need not import that. Let us not waste our money. That was his idea. He was a great economist too. When he went to Edinburgh for doing PhD in chemistry, his birth year is 1861, hardly 4 years after the first war of independence of our country. And British, as I mentioned earlier, that British wanted to create feel-good factor in Indian community. So they had very nice schemes, mainly economical schemes. And they wanted to lure Indians that this is what we have done over here, just to legitimize their presence over here, though imperialistic rule was there. So, what Prafulla Chandra did while he was studying over there was an essay competition, India before and after mutiny 1857. That was the topic for essay. Prafulla Chandra Ray wrote an essay, and he was confident enough not to receive award for this essay, though he was confident enough to have that feeling that this will be the best essay in this competition. The examiner who assessed that essay, he gave back that essay to Prafulla Chandra Ray because that essay was not selected for award. But there was a remark on that essay. This is the best essay which we have received in this competition from any Indian student. But this is totally against the British policies or British schemes in India. So we cannot award anything to this essay. With such remark, that was returned to Prafulla Chandra Ray. But Prafulla Chandra Ray, see his audacity. He was courageous enough to publish this essay with this remark in the Guardian, the daily of London. See what kind of tremors that might have created in London at that point of time. And now that is available in the form of book, 40 pages book, India before and after mutiny, and with all kind of evidences, Prafulla Chandra Ray has proved that how British people are plundering this country. And he has given all kind of examples based on evidences. He has proved literally. And see, at that point of time, he was a student in Edinburgh in England. But he was so courageous to tell truth to British people that what you are doing in India is great injustice. Though he was a student over there. Can we imagine this? That was the courage of Prafulla Chandra Ray. He came back to India and he started teaching chemistry over here. And his students were Prof. Meghnad Saha, Satyendranath Bose and many others. Meghnad Saha and Satyendranath Bose they have specifically mentioned about the teaching skills of Prafulla Chandra Ray. And Meghnad Saha specifically mentioned that though he used to teach us chemistry, through that chemistry, he used to develop patriotism in students' mind. Let us imagine this. He was teaching chemistry. But while teaching chemistry, what used to happen? He used to create patriotic feelings in students' mind. Can we imagine any such teacher at this point of time? But that was the uniqueness of Prafulla Chandra Ray as a teacher. So even though he was a teacher, he was thinking continuously about India's freedom. Teaching was his tool. Industry was his tool. writing great history of science in India was his tool. And he was a person who could teach our great revolutionaries how to prepare explosives. And because of that, the Kolkata police has specifically commented on Prafulla Chandra Rai, and they used to observe all kind of activities of Prafulla Chandra Rai. And what is that comment? British police says that he was a revolutionary in the garb of a scientist. So science was utilized as a tool by Prafulla Chandra Rai to challenge British hegemony. Today we call him as a great father of modern chemistry in India. He established Indian Chemical Society. He was, can we imagine that though he was a teacher, he established 37 industries in his lifetime. From 1861 to 1944, that is his lifespan. He could establish, after returning to India, 37 industries. But he used to stay in the laboratory itself. All the while in his lifetime, he had no house for him. He used to have one small room, adjoining room to his laboratory in Presidency College. Today that Presidency University has preserved that small room where he used to stay. And what he used to do, in his biography is specifically mentioned, because at that point of time GDP of our country was decreasing like anything. And he had a idea that he should live his life in such a way that it should not, his expenditure should not cross the limit of GDP at that point of time of our country. So what kind of simplicity, austerity he must have maintained in his lifetime. He was a great follower of Gandhiji. He used to do charkha every day in the evening. He used to run that charkha. And whatever he used to get out of it, he used to prepare his clothes, or he used to get his clothes through that whatever suit we had, or he used to prepare on his own. So that was his lifestyle. But he could develop students or scientists of our country like Meghnad, Satyendranath Bose and many others. And all these people, they utilize science as a tool to get freedom for our country. And there are many others also. Madan Mohan Malviya is there, Jamshedji Tata is there. You might have heard of this story, how Vivekananda and Jamshedji Tata had a great dialogue. It was a chance meeting when Jamshedji and Vivekanandaji, both of them were going to America. Their entire intention of them were different. But I don't know how many of you know this, that we always hear that Swami Vivekananda went to that World Religious Conference over there. But it was a part of great scientific expo which was organized by Americans in Chicago. In 1492, Christopher Columbus reached America. 12th of October is celebrated as a Columbus Day in America, because on that day, actually Christopher Columbus landed on the shores of America. Today's America. At that point of time, it was never called as America. But and after him, all Europeans started going there, and because of that, we can see today's America. So they remember him with great memory. So this 1892 was the 400th year of Columbus' entry to America, and they wanted to celebrate that. So they organized this great scientific expo over there. It was an expo which ran for 6 months. And that entire year was celebrated by Americans from 1892 October till 1893 October. And this expo, where this World Religious Conference was an adjunct program of that scientific expo. Think about this. This World Religious Conference or World Religion Parliament was an adjunct program of great scientific expo organized by Americans in 1893. It started from March till October, but this conference or World Religious Parliament was for 17 days. It started on the 11th of September and it got concluded on 27th of September. And when Swamiji delivered his first lecture with those great words, sisters and brothers of America, and he rose to that great popularity over there. Jamshedji Tata was going to America because he wanted to visit this scientific or industrial expo organized by Americans. He had a dream of establishing steel industry in India to achieve freedom for our country. Swadeshi, Swavalambi, that was the spirit. And this journey was in two phases. And the first phase got concluded at Japan, and they stayed over there for 12 days. But both of them, when they boarded that ship on the second leg of that journey, they met over there. But it was very unfortunate that though they stayed in the same hotel in Yokohama, they never met each other in those 12 days. But when they started their journey, they met each other, and no one was there to record what they could converse at that point of time. But on the 23rd of November 1898, Jamshedji Tata wrote a letter to Swami Vivekananda that is also available on internet, and it is a part of Tata's digital archives. And Jamshedji tells Vivekananda through this letter, "Dear Swami Vivekananda, can you recall me as your fellow traveler when you boarded a ship at Yokohama? And we did discuss many things about the upliftment of our country. And we did discuss about establishing two kinds of institutes in our country, one for natural sciences, another for humanistic sciences. And by establishing those institutions, we can get or earn our freedom for our motherland." So, with beautiful words, Jamshedji Tata has written to Vivekananda, but Vivekananda declined that, and he said, who is the person other than you who can lead these institutions? So Jamshedji Tata was inviting Vivekananda to lead institution for natural sciences and humanistic sciences. So that was the idea of Jamshedji Tata. He could find great leader in Swami Vivekananda. So that was an invitation to Swami Vivekananda. Swami Vivekananda, being a sannyasi, declined this invitation, but he asked Sister Nivedita to take the responsibility of establishing these two institutes in our country. And as history could unfold after that, in 1902, Swami Vivekananda took Samadhi. In 1904, Jamshedji Tata died. Jamshedpur Tata Steel Industry was established in 1907, and IISc was established in 1908. Lord Curzon came to India in 1905. He had a great design of dividing Bengal, and because of that, this Swadeshi movement got started. It was Sister Nivedita, along with Dorabji Tata, the eldest son of Jamshedji. She took on Lord Curzon, and she challenged him because he was suppressing this idea of Jamshedji and Swami Vivekananda. He was not of the opinion that India should have a scientific research university in India. So he wanted to suppress that. But Sister Nivedita, because of her influence in London and England, she did everything to get it established. There is a letter, there are 5 volumes of Sister Nivedita's literature. Everything has been compiled in those 5 volumes. I could find one later, an appeal by Sister Nivedita to all Indians, where she has specifically mentioned, though all Bangalore people, they call it as Tata Institute, but the appeal says that Sister Nivedita has appealed Indians. She says that there is an Indian who is not the richest amongst Indians, is ready to donate 30 lakh rupees to establish scientific research university in this country, but the expenditure of establishing this university is almost 74 lakhs. So from where we should collect the rest 44 lakhs? So she has appealed countrymen that they should donate generously for the establishment of IISc. And she went to Maharaja of Mysore, and Maharaja of Mysore donated 375 acres of land for establishing IISc, because Mysore Maharaja was a disciple of Swami Vivekananda. So we can understand how things happened in those days. So this was a scientific research university established by our own people. not with the help of British rulers. So all these scientific institutions in those days were established by Indians only. There was no government funding for those institutions. It was a society, it was the people of India who funded generously for the establishment of these institutions. It was a kind of expression of their patriotism. No one had this idea that, oh, it is for someone else. It was a resolve of Indians to establish scientific institutions to have fight against British people. In 1917, Jagdish Chandra Basu established his own institute. It was initially called as Vijnana Mandir. It was established in 1917. 1937, Jagdish Chandra Basu died. So it was called as Basu Vijnana Mandir. In 1947, we got independence, and after that, it is called as Bose Research Institute. After Britishers left, it got an English name. But till 1947, it was a Basu Vijnana Mandir. And if you look at that old building of this lab, you will find it is nothing but a temple. So Jagdish Chandra Basu had a clear-cut idea that it should be purely national institute. It should look like a temple, mandir. So he called it as Vijnana Mandir. He never called it as scientific laboratory. It was for him a temple of science. So we need to understand how all these things got unfolded in those days. In 1916, Mahamana Malviya established Kashi Hindu Vishwavidyalaya. And we all know that in independent India's scientific leadership came from Kashi Hindu Vishwavidyalaya. CSIR's first director, Dr. Bhatnagar, he was a student at Kashi Hindu Vishwavidyalaya. And I don't know how many of you know that the Kulagit of Kashi Hindu Vishwavidyalaya was written by Shanti Swarup Bhatnagar. He was a great poet. So, understand the feelings of these people. They were scientists, but they were utilizing science as a tool to get freedom back. So that was the idea. And today's science in India is standing on that great foundation which was laid in the days of struggle. Let us understand this. So it is a great thing that we should understand that British invasion was a scientific invasion. The tool of British people were science. It was science, and our own people could understand and recognize their tool as well as their methodology, and they wanted to earn that tool in their hands. They wanted to equip themselves with the same tool and challenge British hegemony. So all these people, they were freedom fighters. They were doing all these things. They were establishing scientific institutions. They were doing science to challenge British hegemony, challenge British rule over here. Let us understand this. In my opinion, this celebration of 75th year of India has offered us an opportunity to revisit our freedom struggle and understand the basic truth about it. So, I am being a worker of Vijnana Bharti. We thought that let us revisit this entire struggle, and after revisiting and going through the historical pages, we could find this great truth from those historical pages, and we thought of presenting this to our people. And unless, as everyone says, that the best doctor is who can understand the illness of patient in a very logical manner, and then only a logical treatment can be given. Unless we understand the truth behind the aggression or invasion by British people, we won't be able to find solutions for our country's situation even today. So let us revisit this entire struggle and let us understand how British people utilized scientific tool as well as scientific methodology to subjugate our country, and how our own people, they equip themselves with the same tool and with same methodologies to challenge British rule over here. This we could get through one statement by a famous scientist, another Indian who received Nobel Prize, but unfortunately he left India after independence. His name was Dr. S. Chandrasekhar. He was a nephew of Dr. Chandrasekhar Venkat Raman. S. Chandrasekhar, after receiving a Nobel Prize in 1983, there was one biographer. He was seeking information from him about his own life as well as India and science in India. And this biographer of Dr. S. Chandrasekhar put a question to Dr. S. Chandrasekhar in this manner. He asked a question that Dr. Chandrasekhar, why do you feel that golden age of Indian science appeared in first 3 decades of 20th century? I had already mentioned that it was from 1900 till 1930. Dr. S. Chandrasekhar gave a reply in this manner. He said, there was a need for national expression to showcase British regime that Indians are equal even in the domain of science. So this was a reply by Dr. S. Chandrasekhar. That was his analysis of the situation. So through many such things, we can understand that what kind of struggle our own people they had in those days. And today's science and technology in India is standing on those foundations laid by these people in the days of that adverse conditions. So let us understand and let us pay tributes to them, because all of us today are standing on their shoulders. Let us pay tributes to them. That's all. Thanks a lot to give me this opportunity to present you thoughts like this in front of you. Namaste.
Thanks a lot, Jayant, for giving a mesmerizing account of how the Indian scientists have laid the foundations on which we are standing and where we have to go from here now to do much more better than what was achieved earlier. So that's the message we got. And so we can open some for questions. We will take some questions. So if there are any questions, comments, anything?
Thank you, Jayant. We are really very impressed to know such a bright period of 1900 to 1930 and golden age of the science. So my question is related to Jagdish Chandra Basu. When he did the study on plant, that there is a heartbeat kind of in a plant, and he wanted to demonstrate in Royal Society of Science in Britain. He failed to demonstrate that experiment there. Is it failure or because it was working in India, Calcutta, but not there?
I do not have any idea whether it was failure or not. Sorry for this. I cannot give you the answer. I have no idea about it. You can read the biography of Jagdish Chandra Basu by Patrick Geddes. Recently, I have come across a new biography by Kunal Ghosh. I have not read it, but it is a good account of Jagdish Chandra Basu's life and work. So you may find answer for your question over there. What is your good name, sir? Huh? Shashi Kumar.
Yeah, thank you. I think it's wonderful to hear all these, because in these auditoriums we don't hear any of this glorious past of Indian science. I'm trained as a biochemist, and even here, if you ask any time in last 30 or 40 years in any class of biochemistry, the heroes of biochemistry were never taught. You know, even from pre-independence, that Dr. Subbarao who made methotrexate, under such difficult conditions since 1945, only drug US FDA approved till now. So I think it's inspiring to hear these kind of stories, and this should be a must, that all these kind of stories, you know, even the function of ATP, which everybody knows ATP, but we don't attach it with our own history and our own science. So thank you very much for bringing all these points.
What is your good name? Naveen?
Naveen Khanna.
नमस्कार जयंत जी, आपका बहुत ही अच्छा व्याख्यान रहा और हम लोगों को, स्पेशली जो यंगस्टर्स हैं, हम लोगों को पता चला कि कितना ग्लोरियस साइंस कंट्रीब्यूशन है इन दी इंडिपेंडेंस स्ट्रगल, जो हमें फ्रीडम के लिए स्ट्रगल किया हम लोगों ने थ्रू साइंस। हमने कभी ऐसा सुना नहीं, हमें हमेशा लगता है कि स्वतंत्रता सेनानी है, और पर अपना अपना सबकी जगह एक वजूद है, सबकी इम्पोर्टेंस है। लेकिन सर आजकल की जनरेशन जो है इन सब साइंटिस्ट के बारे में थोड़ी सी अनभिज्ञ है, उनको जानकारी नहीं है, तो इस तरह के व्याख्यान और होने चाहिए मेरे विचार से। इस तरह से एक जुड़ाव होना चाहिए जो कि आप अलग अलग संस्थानों में जाके इस प्रोजेक्ट करें कि हम यंगस्टर्स को भी पता चले कि हाँ क्या ग्लोरियस पास था और हम कैसे उसे कंटिन्यू कर सकते हैं। धन्यवाद।
धन्यवाद। आपका नाम बताइए।
सर मेरा नाम इंद्रा है, इंद्रा सुनानिया। मैं यहीं नेबरिंग इंस्टीट्यूट IUAC से हूँ। आपने वहाँ पे भी अभी एक विचार प्रकट किया था पिछले महीने। धन्यवाद।
Anyone else? Among the students or anyone? And the good thing is that, as you said, this lecture is available on YouTube. Will be available. The recorded version is available on YouTube. So one can watch anytime. So, and you can have. Oh yeah. And most other things are actually published. All the accounts, different writers have done great research on the historical facts and all published. All the articles are published in this book, which has been published by Vijnana Bharti. And if you want this book, you can order on site, the sites. And you can have all the discussions at the tea. Now I request the director to give the kind of a small token of appreciation for this wonderful talk.
But let me thank Jayant ji for readily agreeing to come here for giving this talk. Right, I think it's nationally last working day before we celebrate 75th year of Independence Day. We are supposed to hoist the flag from 13th to 15th. So it is wonderful occasion in that sense. I actually got hugely inspired when I heard Jayant ji in Hyderabad, where he gave 2 lectures on Science Leaders Conclave, and that really gave me a thought that he should actually come and give a talk here, so that our students, and not only our students but participants in ICGB across the world will be able to hear, because this is live. And he agreed to come and give this talk, and we as ICGB are really grateful to you, Jayant ji, and we can go and have a tea, and Jayant ji will be available at the tea, so you can feel free to ask any comments with him during next 10-15 minutes. Thank you.